It's that favorite bean-eating mofo fresh off the banana boat. Big Lou tapping back in with y'all with What It Do with Big Lou and FCR2. If this is the first time you're coming to the channel, it's highly appreciated. If you sub, like, and share the channel with your family, friends, peoples, gente, folks, comrades, camaradas, buddies, pals, associos, amigos, panas, uh, associates, whatever it is, the word that you use to describe that you call your peoples, your family, right? Also, be sure to comment on the comment, and I respond back to all the comments. So as you can see, the thumbnail, this is going to be my first wrestling profile that I'm doing on the profiles from the 80s of my, good old memory days as a kid of when I started getting into sports, right? Hey, what's going on? Thanks for coming. So I already dropped 5 baseball players. I already dropped 4 football players, and I dropped 6 basketball players. So this is my first professional wrestling profile. And as you can see, it's the Road Warriors, aka the Legion of Doom, Hawk and Animal. They were billed from Chicago, but they were really from Minnesota. Michael Moormill, good morning. And in my opinion, like you see in the title, they're the greatest tag team of all time. These guys held titles in every major promotion, being WWF was later, but first AWA with Vern Gagne, then NWA World Tag Team Champions, which was out of Jim Crockett Promotions, and then they were also WWF champions, and then also New Japan Pro Wrestling champions. And I believe I heard this before out of Animal in one of his shoot interviews that they held the AWA, NWA, and New Japan Pro Wrestling titles, tag team titles, all at the same time. I heard him say something that along the lines that they didn't have a contract with any promotion, and he did that strategically for benefit, to be beneficial to them for as far as making money. You know what I mean? Back then in the 80s, especially the 80s, tag teams were a big deal, right? Tag teams, it's not like now, but tag teams were huge, and being the tag team champions was just like being the heavyweight champion. It's just, it was a duel, 2 of them. And then also they also won the Crockett Cup. There was a tournament for tag teams. They won the Crockett Cup, I believe, twice. And they also were at different times a 6-man tag team champions. Well, I know they held it with Dusty Rhodes before, and I think they held it with Nikita Koloff as well. I might have to look that up, but I know for sure with Dusty Rhodes they were the 3-man tag team. Yeah, Animal had the mohawk, and Hawk had the two lines of hair on top. And also the storyline on that is that it was so that when they put their heads together, it was like plugging in. You know what I mean? And then their manager was Paul Ellering. Paul Ellering is another Minnesota native. He used to be a bodybuilder. And his attitude, the promos they used to cut, were they were excellent. You know what I mean? They went well together. They meshed together well. The Road Warriors and Paul Ellering. See, Hawk had the reverse mohawk. LOL, that's what I have. You call that a reverse mohawk, huh? And these dudes were I mean, because they're big dudes as far as, yoked, right? They're yoked, they're muscular, right? They work out, big on working out. But they were kind of before their time, right? Because yeah, you had Hulk Hogan was already out. Hulk Hogan was a singles, but these guys were a tag team. But originally, Animal was a singles wrestler at first, and he went by the name of like basically the Road Warrior. You remember that movie with Mel Gibson, the Road Warrior? And so he was wrestling, I believe, for Ole Anderson, because Ole Anderson is also from Minnesota, and he was trained by these guys. I don't know if Hawk also, but Animal was trained by Ed Sharkey, who was an old wrestler in the Minnesota area, and he trained Animal, and then Ole Anderson, somehow caught wind of him or something like that, took him down to Florida Championship Wrestling, and that's where he began his career as the Road Warrior. And then somewhere along the line, he sees a picture of Hawk, and he thought it was Animal, and he's like, "Why are you showing me a picture of Animal?" Or whatever they were calling him at the time, the Road Warrior. And he's like, that's not him, that's Hawk. And he's like, wait a minute, there's two guys like that? And he goes, yeah. So he ends up grabbing Hawk, and then they make them a tag team. And now they're the Road Warriors together, Hawk and Animal, and they're billed from Chicago. And then I'm not really sure the time frame, but eventually they go to AWA, which is based out of Minnesota, and they wrestle for Vern Gagne, and they become AWA champions. They had some good matches with Von Raschke, Larry Henning, the Axe Henning, also I think they were called the Fabs, the Fabulous Ones, I think they were called. Stan, Sweet Stan, who ended up being with Midnight Express, was originally with them, with that tag team, the Fabulous Ones. I know it was said that these guys were, they were masters of the squash match, right? Where they would just go in there and just literally beat the shit out of the dudes and tag them out. I mean, not tag them, but pin them, and it's over with, right? But they were said to be stiff, and what that means is stiff is, you don't go well with with the program when you're wrestling. You know what I mean? You're stiff. You're not basically, you're just not ready. You're not ready for the matches. You know what I'm saying? You're stiff, and when guys are trying to work with you, it makes it difficult, more harder for them to accomplish, basically having a decent match. So they were stiff, when they first came in, which that's not that happens a lot with wrestlers. You know what I mean? These dudes were big guys. Animal probably had, I know he was able to bench press like 600 pounds. He was a pretty big dude. He had some big ass arms, right? Probably like, I don't know. He had some big arms, probably some 21s easy. And Hawk was a little bit smaller as far as the arm size, but he had shoulder caps, and he had traps. He was big all around the shoulders, the neck area. You know what I mean? He was buff too, but just not as big as Animal. And that's what everybody remembers. They come in, they got the face paint, they got the shoulder pads, with the spikes. That, like I said, when they cut their promos, which, if anybody know, promos are like your interviews. I mean, they were on, like, they would captivate people, and it was their gimmick as the Road Warriors, and the dressing, the costume that they wore, and things like that. It captivated people. It really got people to, believe them. It wasn't like they come on there and then people was like, oh yeah, right. In other words, like, they ain't got it. You know what I'm saying? Like the gift of gab. You know what I'm saying? They had a lot of charisma. These dudes were main event status. Pretty quick. They would fill out stadiums all over the place. Stadiums, coliseums, wherever the event that they were performing at was going to be held, they would sell it out. And they were, big name. They became a big name in pro wrestling. You know what I'm saying? But I remember them vaguely in AWA. And I might not even remember them really from AWA. It might be the reason that I'm thinking that is because I used to get the Pro Wrestling magazine. You know what I mean? And so you would see, all the different promotions. Obviously WWF, they had their own magazine, but they would still, in the Pro Wrestling magazine, they still would have WWF wrestlers, stories about them, pictures, But you would see more of the AWA in there, NWA, obviously Jim Crockett Promotions. You would see WCCW. You would see uh, CWF. You see like Jerry Lawler and Eddie Gilbert. You see pinups with them and different articles. New Age plug. Good morning, Wendy. I feel those guys seem to be naturally big guys. Yeah. Well, Dudley Brothers, I don't think Dudley Brothers. I mean, when you look at their accolades, but Dudley Brothers, these guys, Road Warriors had, like I mentioned earlier, I don't think you heard it because you just tapped in, but the Road Warriors held every major tag team title from the major promotions. So they held the AWA Tag Team Championship. They held the NWA World Heavy Tag Team Champions. They held the WWF at one time. They held the New Japan Pro Wrestling Championship. They were winners of the Jim Crockett Cup, I think twice. They also at different times held the 6-man titles. You know what I mean? So the Dudley Brothers might have more wins because they, with the WWF different times winning it, losing it, but they didn't hold titles in AWA, NWA. You know what I mean? Because I don't even remember that one brother, Road Dogg. What was he? He's an Armstrong, right? He I don't remember him being in Jim Crockett. I remember the other brother. The other brother they called Brad. I think it was Brad. He was the light heavyweight or the cruiserweight. It was either light heavyweight or cruiserweight. He held. That was a little maybe right after they sold Jim Crockett Promotions to Ted Turner. Maybe it might have been, or it might have been just before it. But the Road Warriors are just, these guys are beasts. You know what I mean? And then that's the thing too. When they say Dusty Rhodes held the title with them, the 6-man before. But they said, well, not they said, but people say that Dusty would attach himself to people that were hot. When he got older. You know what I mean? So as everybody knows, well, I don't know if everybody knows, but Minnesota, kicks out a lot of pro wrestlers, right? Big name wrestlers, Vern Gagne, 1972, that year that Ric Flair broke out after being trained by Vern Gagne and Billy Robinson. Also was Jim Brunzell, Greg Gagne, Ken Patera, and the Iron Sheik. They all came out in 72. Those are some big names right there, right? And then on top of that, you got the Minnesota Wrecking Crew. You got Larry Henning, Kurt Henning, Ravishing Rick Rude, Nikita Koloff, the Road Warriors, Tom Zink, Jim Brunzell, Greg Gagne, Barry Darsow, one half of the Demolition, John Nord, the Berserker, also Scott Norton, Flash Scott Norton. There might be one or two more, but that's Minnesota. Minnesota guys, Robindale, Minnesota, around that area. Yeah, I didn't know them in that federation. You didn't know who in that federation? Michael Moormill. So yeah, like he said, naturally big guys, so they're known for their impressive physiques. But what's weird? So Animal had two brothers that wrestled. One guy I never really heard of. One of the brothers. The other one was Laurinaitis. He was he had an office job with the WWF, and then he wrestled a time for. There were guys on skateboards in NWA, Jim Crockett Promotions. Then he married the Bella twins. His mom, Joe is Animal. Jim, is his name Jim? Anyways, that brother, he had somewhat of a career. He did a lot better in Japan, but the physiques are, obviously Animal worked out, but still, other than their height, in which they're not really tall. These guys weren't tall guys. They were like 6'1", 6'2", maybe. So they were yoked up, but they weren't the tall guys. So Hogan was 6'7". A few different guys came later that were taller than him. You know what I mean? But he and Hawks brothers, because they did a thing on talking to his brothers for the Dark Side of the Ring episode, and they're just one brother was kind of like dorky, kind of in a sense, and so I don't know where these guys, if it was just all from working out, or you know what I mean, or what, but they were a lot bigger than their siblings. So yeah, everybody knows they were known for their impressive physiques, right? And their physical size was much larger than most wrestlers of that era, which that's what I pretty much covered already, right? Uh, their name was inspired by Mad Max, the Road Warrior, right? The film The Road Warrior. They were first wrestlers to bring a theme from a movie into wrestling. They also introduced a tandem maneuver known as the Doomsday Device. Both men used the move as a team finisher throughout their careers. Also, you heard that song Iron Man, the song by uh, Black Sabbath. The house went crazy. You know what I mean? So I think I made a mistake earlier. I said Florida wrestling. It was actually Georgia, where Animal got to start at, right? So here we go. So Joe Laurinaitis, which is what I pretty much already covered, he was given the name Road Warrior, right? And then Ole Anderson paired him up with Mike Hegstrand, which is Adam Hawk, right? And they formed in like '83. They were initially brought into Paul Ellering's stable as a replacement for the team of Matt Bourne and Arn Anderson. So Matt Bourne is a pretty good wrestler. He's Doink the Clown. That's who played Doink the Clown was Matt Bourne and Arn Anderson. Everybody knows who Arn Anderson is. So these guys, Hawk and Animal, replaced Matt Bourne and Arn Anderson in Precious Paul Ellering's stable. So then they end up they dumped Ellering for a while, saying I guess I don't know if it was type of issues, but they said that they didn't need a manager, right? And then they got back with them and they formed another stable, calling the stable the Legion of Doom in NWA's wrestling, right? Georgia Championship Wrestling territory. And they also had Jake the Snake Roberts was in that group, and the Spoiler. And then I believe at some point, and this is the part I'm not really sure of, Sting and Ultimate Warrior were the Blade Runners. They joined the crew as well, but I'm not sure what promotion they were in at the time. I haven't been able to really find that. So, because at the time they were in CWF with Jeff Jarrett, and which was about 85, 84, 85. So I'm not really sure because they were in Georgia Championship Wrestling. So I haven't been able to place that where they actually, became acquainted with each other. So, like I said, they had a high impact powerhouse style wrestling where they would just come in and just squash guys. I mean, like what they would call, what did they call these guys? Basically the guys that were with the company a long time and would just get beat. You know what I mean? Like George South, Iron Mike, guys like that. You know what I mean? That one guy used to tap his shoulder. I forgot his name right now. Those guys, they would get beat. You know what I mean? And until they started wrestling more known, tag teams, they would squash everybody. You know what I mean? And then they had, not only was their style like that, like I said, powerhouse, it was a unique attire that that quickly became uh, a fan favorite. You know what I mean? Where they would come in there with and then along with the music. So along with the music, the attire they wore, the way they dressed, and then their gimmick, and then the style of wrestling, the powerhouse, clothesline, uh, power slam, press, so pressing people over their head, you know, and pretty much that was it. You know what I mean? And then they had that move where uh, they would put the person on their shoulder, and then they would get a the doomsday device. They get that clothesline off the ropes, and then the clothesline. I think I already mentioned that, but that was another power move. Um, so a lot of the opponents were kind of scared of these dudes, and if they found out they were wrestling them, they would just grab their bag and take off. They didn't want no part of the Road Warriors. So when they started wrestling, that's when they started getting their push was in Georgia, right? Which was a Georgia Championship Wrestling, which was which was under the NWA banner, right? So they quickly rose to the top, just despite being young and being in green, and then wrestlers at the time, they feel, a lot of them feel like, especially the old timers, the old school guys, they feel like it's a pecking order. Like, in other words, you got to put your time, and you don't just go right to the top. So that a lot of guys didn't like that. A lot of the old school wrestlers didn't like that. They felt like the Road Warriors didn't pay their dues. Um, so like I said, they grew that reputation of being stiff and not selling for their opponents. And what not selling means is, uh, when you're selling it, that means you're going with the flow. If your opponent's like hitting on you, you're going with the flow. You're making it believable to the audience, right? That's called selling. So they won, like I said, they won the NWA Tag Team Championships. They would hold that title they would hold it 3 times, 3 or 4 times in Georgia alone. And then in '84 they went to AWA, right? Which was Vern Gagne. AWA was based out of Minnesota, their home state. Steve Tortola, top of the world, Big Low. Off to work, my friend. Have a wonderful day. Yeah, you have a good day. Blessed day at work. So again, they hook up with Paul Ellering, right? And on August 25th, '84, they beat the Crusher and Baron von Raschke to win the AWA title, right? They were brought in to work as heels, and heels is the kayfabe word for bad guys. Baby faces are good guys. So they were brought in to be heels, right? By Vern Gagne. So the squash matches that they were doing, that they were involved with a lot, they started winning over the fans. And here these guys are coming in smashing everybody all the time. It makes it weird or hard, however you want to state it, for when now you're wrestling, say, Larry the Axe Henning, and Baron von Raschke, where you're taking punishment, and then now you're being hurt by these guys when all along you've been whipping everybody. But it worked. They were AWA's top draw throughout '84 and '85. And then, like I had mentioned earlier, they were feuding with the Fabulous Ones and the Fabulous Freebirds. Then they started splitting their time between AWA and NWA affiliate Jim Crockett Promotion. This is when I mentioned earlier about not having a contract with any promotion, and they were able to bounce freely between the promotions and winning titles simultaneously, and pretty much it benefited their pockets as far as on the business end. You know what I mean? And then when they would go to NWA, they would feud with the Russians, which was the Koloffs, Ivan and Nikita, and they were still the AWA champions when they were wrestling in NWA. And like I mentioned this earlier, Animal said has I've heard Animal say this in before he passed in different videos, shoot videos, that they held the AWA uh, heavyweight titles, tag team, the NWA heavyweight tag team titles at the same time. And I heard New Japan as well, but I've never read that up nowhere. I never was able to find that nowhere. And then they started and then too, what was going on at that same time was you had AWA and NWA promoting events together, and I think it was called the Clash of the Champions. But that didn't live too long because it was said that Jim Crockett guys were trying to uh, take some of the talent from the AWA, you know what I mean, and get them to sign contracts with Jim Crockett. Um, so eventually they end up losing the AWA titles to Jimmy Garvin and Mr. Electricity Steve Regal. That was in '85, but it was with the interference of the Freebirds. Their last appearance in AWA was in '86 in April at Wrestle Rock, where they defeated the team of Garvin and Michael Hayes in a steel cage match. During their AWA stint, you know, like I mentioned earlier, they became well known for that song "Iron Man" by Black Sabbath. So that was the big combination for them that worked that helped also to push them, give them the push was their look, their their attire, what they how they dressed, and the song, and then obviously their powerhouse style in the ring, right? Uh, and then they were in Japan from '85 to '90, off and on. They were able to come in and out. Um, this was all Japan Pro Wrestling, not New Japan Pro Wrestling, and they made immediate impact, squashing the monster team of Killer Khan and Animal Hamaguchi in less than 4 minutes. Uh, they had a lot of dominant victories that garnered the Road Warriors a lot of Japanese wrestling media headlines and front page stories. Their tours with All Japan in '85 and '86 made the Road Warriors legends in Japan, and they made big money there. They're one of the groups that were able to make huge money in Japan. I would say it had to be the Road Warriors, Terry Funk, and there. Let me see. Yeah, it was. I would say for tag team wise, it was the Road Warriors. You had the Funks. You had Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen. Uh, not Kamala, but Abdullah. Abdullah the Butcher, Andre the Giant made good money over there. Um, they were pretty huge over there, very huge over there in Japan. Um, so whenever they were between contracts of the big three on the U.S. soil, they would be in Japan. So they won the NWA International Tag Team Championship in March of '87 from Jumbo Shiruda and Shinichiro Ten Ryu. They'd hold him for 15 months before losing them to PWF Tag Team Champions Jumbo Tsuruda and Yosaki Yatsu. They unified the titles at the All Japan Pro Wrestling Tag Team titles making the Road Warriors the last defending champions of the NWA International Tag Team titles. Their last match in Japan was in July of 1990, this time for New Japan Pro Wrestling. And they lost to Masashiro Chono and Kiji Mutoa by disqualification. Then 86 to 90, they're Jim Crockett promotion again. And they won their inaugural Jim Crockett Senior Memorial Cup Tag Team Tournament by beating Ron Garvin and Magnum TA in the finals. You know what I mean? They were the first to win that. So they were also featured attractions of the Great American Bash '86, where they were put up against Ivan and Nikita Koloff, as well as Midnight Express. At Starrcade '86, the Road Warriors were featured in a scaffold match, defeating the Midnight Express. I remember that too. That's when Jim Cornette was supposed to be caught by Big Bubba down there. You know, he was supposed to drop from there, but there was no way that was going to work. Let's see, the Road Warriors also joined forces with Dusty and Nikita in a bloody feud with the Four Horsemen during the '87 American Bash. During the American Bash, the rival sides faced off in the first ever War Games match. Road Warriors were on the winning side of the War Games both matches that summer, taking their feud with the Horsemen at Starrcade '87, where they lost by disqualification to Tully and Arn Anderson. Road Warriors also picked up the NWA World Six-Man Tag Championships twice alongside Dusty Rhodes. Road Warriors twice. The Road Warriors engaged in a violent feud with the Powers of Pain. So when the Powers of Pain came in, these guys were like almost identical to the Road Warriors as far as the look, but they were like how would you say that? They were like the extra large version of them. They were taller, they were a little more muscular. You know what I mean? So it was like, aha, we finally got somebody to squash you. You know what I'm saying? And they were ran by Paul Jones. Paul Jones's army. He had a lot of guys in his stable for a while there. So it was said that the Road Warriors finally met their match physically, but the angle ended when the Powers of Pain left Jim Crockett Promotions and they went to WWF. You know what I mean? I guess they learned that they were going to be booked in some scaffold matches with the Road Warriors and that they were going to lose. And you know, the guys being so big, what they weighed, that's kind of scary to fall from 15, 20 feet high, whatever it was, be 300 pounds, and fall. So they turned heel in '88 and they attacked their partner Sting during the defense of the Six-Man Championship. And then they won that was in '88, and then '88. That's so funny saying that. And then in '88, NWA World Tag Team Championship on October 29th in New Orleans at a house show against the Midnight Express. In November of that year, Road Warriors played a role in ending Dusty Rhodes' tenure as head booker for the promotion during the November 26th episode of World Championship Wrestling, which was under strict instructions from TBS television. Because they didn't want the blading no more, which is, where you cut your own self. Nobody knows you're doing it. It's made to look like your opponent's beating you so good that they're busting up your face and your forehead and causing you to bleed. But in fact, during moves where you can hide it and get it done, sometimes they'll have a blade in their wristband, or maybe other places where they'll pop it out and cut themselves in the forehead. Well, TBS television executives were straight against that because of the TV being TV, and kids seeing it or whatever. So they got suspended for a week. So, do that. What? Oh, so excuse me. So they end up, like I said, TBS was against that, and they removed the spike from the shoulder pads and attempted to gouge his eyes out. And then Rhodes was fired, and that's what the last day of him being the booker for Jim Crockett promotion. And then Animal beat him at the Clash of Champions, so the Road Warriors were allowed to pick a new partner to hold the NWA World Six-Man titles. They picked All Japan Pro Wrestling superstar Genichiro Tenryu, but the titles were quickly abandoned. Right, and I think they did away with the 6-man after that. Then the Road Warriors quickly turned face again due to overwhelming fan support because they were always considered the heels, but the fans pushed for them to become baby faces again. The World Tag Team title reign came to an end when they faced the Varsity Club, Mike Rotunda and Steve Williams, on April 2nd of '89. The title change was a controversial one as referee Teddy Long performed an extensively fast count. I remember that too. They knocked him over, or they pushed him or something, and he fell and he was laying on the ground. And then as soon as the Varsity Club had them in a position to tag him out, he went over there and fast. And I even think he dived and he counted quick, 1, 2, 3, and he called it, and it was over. And they lost the titles. And then he lost his job. Long lost his job due to the count, but the titles were not returned to the Road Warriors. And then that put Teddy Long in a position to become a manager. He managed a few guys. Hawk and Animal would then spend the rest of their tenure in WCW as Jim Crockett Promotions became known after being purchased by Turner Broadcasting System in '88, feuding with teams like the Samoan SWAT team and the Skyscrapers. The Skyscrapers were Sid Vicious and Dan Spivey, I believe. And then the Samoan SWAT team were members of the family, the Samoan family that everybody's related to, Roman Reigns and Rikishi and all them. CM Punk, I don't. That's way after my time. Big Lou. Yeah, happy Saturday. Yeah, we're proud Puerto Ricans for all eternity. That's for sure. That's for sure. So the Skyscrapers were Sid Vicious, like 6'9", and Dan Spivey's like 6'7", I think. And their last big wins in WCW came when they defeated 3 other teams, including the Red Hot Steiner Brothers, to win the Iron Man Tag Team Tournament at Starrcade '89 Future Shock. The Steiners were very hot too, and they're also a legendary tag team. They actually defeated the Road Warriors in a pinfall in their match, but the Warriors won the round robin style tournament on a point system over the Skyscrapers in Chicago street fight at Wrestle War 90 Wild Thing. And then the Road Warriors made their last WCW pay-per-view appearance on May 19, 1990 at the Capitol Combat, where they teamed with Norman the Lunatic against Kevin Sullivan, Cactus Jack, and Bam Bam Bigelow in a match that was cut from the commercial tape of the event. They left WCW in June '90 to due to heat with then WCW head Jim Herd. And a lot of guys didn't like Jim Herd. I think Jim Herd used to be like a executive or something with Pizza Hut or Straw Hat Pizza or something like that. CM Punk should return to WWE. I don't really know too much about CM Punk. And then they went to the WWF from 1990 to 92, which is almost 10 years after their debut in Georgia Championship Wrestling. So Hawk and them signed with WWF in June of 90. Vince retired the name Road Warriors, and they started going by their second name. They were known by the Legion of Doom because they had the Ultimate Warrior. Obviously, he had the name Warrior in his name already, and then also Kerry Von Erich. His new handle, his new name had something Warrior in it as well. The Modern Day Warrior, it was called, yeah. So they didn't want to have the Road Warriors, the Ultimate Warrior, and the Modern Day Warrior. So they started being known as the Legion of Doom, which they were already known by that already, anyways. They made their DVD debut on July 15, 1990, of Wrestling Challenge. WWF, the team would be known only as Legion of Doom. And despite the altered team name, they were still individually Road Warrior Hawk, Road Warrior Animal. Hawk and Animal immediately got into a feud with Demolition because Demolition was somewhat of a spin-off look to the Road Warriors. You know what I mean? And those guys, one was Bill Eadie, the other one was Barry Darsow. Barry Darsow grew up with these guys in Miami, Minnesota, and he was Crusher Khrushchev before he was part of the Demolition, and then later he was the Repo Man and Blacktop Bully or something like that. And then Bill Eadie was I believe his name before that was the Masked Superstar, and he was also a big name in Japan under the Masked Superstar. So they went up against first they teamed up with Ultimate Warrior against all three Demolition members, right? Which was Crush, Axe, and Smash. Axe was moved into a manager position later with the team with the hope of taking a front office position, which eventually fell through. The Legion of Doom Demolition feud did not have the expected intensity because of the change, and LOD soon left their sights on the tag team titles, which that was another weird thing, is that they went straight into that, right? It was like they came to the WWF to get with Demolition's program. But I think they only wrestled like 3 times or something like that, which didn't make sense, right? I don't understand it. At SummerSlam 91 in Madison Square Garden, Legion of Doom defeated the Nasty Boys in a no DQ street fight to win the tag team titles, becoming the only team to win world tag team titles in 3 of the top promotions of the 80s, which I had mentioned that earlier: AWA, NWA, and WWF. Eventually, they lose their titles to Money Incorporated, IRS, and the $1 Million Man. And then in February of 92, they briefly left the promotion. They would return a short time later, and Paul Ellering would be back as their manager in WrestleMania. The team later incorporated a ventriloquist dummy called Rocco, which that was all weird. That all part of it there was weird. And then they also got caught up in all the weird storylines in WWF. You know, Hawk was up there, and the Jumbotron machine was gonna jump, and then that dude Puke crawl up, climb up there, and then try to grab him, and then he fell. Then they had Hawk acting like he was a drunk. It was all weird. It was weird, you know what I mean? Weird storylines in order to get heat. It just wasn't. I don't know. That was about the end when I stopped watching wrestling for a long time. And then they were in New Japan now from 92 to 96. When Hawk left the WWF after SummerSlam, he traveled to Japan. But I think he was over there only, and Hawk was still, Animal was still here, and that's when he his new partner was one of the Japanese wrestler, and they called him Power Warrior, and they were dubbed the Hellraisers, and they basically carried on the Road Warriors image, in Japan, but it was with the new partner now. You know what I mean? And I think they won the championship, the IWGP tag team titles. Um, and I really didn't really like by that time I was really out of the scene. You know what I mean? And then they came back to WCW in '96. He had some back problems. Well, that's yeah. Let me rewind a little back. Animal had a back surgery. He had a match. I believe it was a handicap match with. He was wrestling two guys. I believe he power slammed one of them and jacked up his back. And then, so while he was getting surgery, in pain with the back problem, and then eventually having surgery, and then the healing time. This is when Hawk was back in Japan alone, and that's when he took on Power Warrior as his partner. So once Joe Laurinaitis, which is Hawk or Animal, excuse me, healed enough for him to return to wrestling, the Road Warriors signed a contract in '95. And upon their return, January '96, they immediately started their feud back up with the Steiner brothers, as well as Harlem Heat. Harlem Heat's another one of my favorite tag teams. Yankees for life. Buenos dias. And so they started up a feud right back up with the Steiner brothers and then Harlem Heat. And then before moving on to the WCW Tag Team Champions, Sting and Luger. Road Warriors had several shots at the champions, but they failed to win the title. They stayed with them for about another 6 months before leaving over a dispute with Bischoff. So many wrestlers had disputes with Bischoff, right? They made claims that Bischoff promised them a second highest paid contract as well as separate contract from Japan, something which he denies, right? Then they went back to the WWF in '97 and '98, and then they did some teaming up with what was his name? Ahmed Johnson, I think it was. They teamed up with Ahmed Johnson to face the Nation of Domination. So Farouk, Crush, and Savio Vega, they had beefs with, and they were gonna have a street fight in WrestleMania 13 in the hometown of Chicago. They'd be involved with feuds with the Hart Foundation. Uh, they did some siding with Stone Cold, Ken Shamrock, and Goldust. In Your House, Canadian Stampede, and they also, just for the record, they won twice. They held the WWF titles twice, and they lost to what New Plug brought up earlier, New Age Outlaws, Road Dogg and Billy Gunn, right? And then they got repackaged as LOD 2000 and 98, 99. They were basically like an updated version of the Road Warriors for the new millennium. I think that's when they started having the white shoulder pads, and they had more white in their face paint. I used to like the Guerrero brothers. Talking about the old school, the father was Gordy Guerrero, and then you had Hector Chavo Sr. There's Hector Chavo Sr. There was Armando Guerrero. Those are Eddie's big brothers. And then Eddie was closer to the age of his nephew, Chavo Jr. And that's when they added Sonny as their manager, was part of their crew. And then also Draws, which was Puke, right? He was an ex-football player for the Broncos. And then he, I don't know what happened to him, but he's in a wheelchair now. He's like paralyzed. So they made a brief appearance on Raw in 1999, where they whooped on Pat Patterson and Jerry Briscoe in a backstage skit after the two impersonated LOD in a handicap match against Shane McMahon on March 15th, 99. So the week before that, the LOD entered the pre WrestleMania Battle Royal with the last two participants getting a tag team title shot later at WrestleMania, but they both came up short. So by that time, they were already, you know, 15, 16 years into their careers, and a lot of younger up and coming tag team were, up, coming up in the WWF getting that push. And then they went back to Japan and the independent circuit from 99 to 2003. Um, All Japan Pro Wrestling to team with Johnny Ace as they defeated a couple of Japanese guys at the Giant Baba Memorial Show. Then they went to Australia, winning the IGW tag team titles against Public Enemy for iGeneration pay-per-view. That was in June of 2000. Then Animal will return to WCW and competed solo in early 2001 before WWF bought the company in March 2001. Hegstrand, which is Hawk, dealt with his personal issues. In 2001, they defeated the Nasty Boys for the Excitement Wrestling Federation on June 22nd, 2002, performing for International Wrestling Superstars IWS. Road Warriors, Animal, and Hawk defeated the Head Shrinkers for the World Tag Team Championship. That victory also led to Team USA winning the international tournament held in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And then Road Warriors appeared briefly in TNA during the early days of the promotion, saving America's Most Wanted and debuting to what Jeremy Borash quoted as a 1985 Road Warrior pop. And that's pretty much. Hawk would pass away in 2003. And then before that, he became a born-again Christian. Actually, both of them in 2001, and he would later appear on Ted DiBiase's religion and wrestling shows in 2003. It was during this time that Hegstrand overcame his drug and alcohol addiction, but he passed away that year. And Animal performed, a little bit more before he retired. I'm gonna now say some of the championships that they held before closing this out. Houston Wrestling was my favorite wrestling. Houston Wrestling. Who ran the Houston? Because I know Joe Blanchard, which is Tully Blanchard. His dad ran San Antonio. The Funks ran Amarillo. Dallas was Mon Eric. I'm trying to think, did they open up a Houston office? Dusty Rosen might have opened up a Houston office. So they held the All Japan Pro Wrestling. In All Japan Pro Wrestling, they held the NWA International Tag Team Championships one time. AWA, they held the tag team titles one time. World Japan Tag Teams one time. NWA National Tag Team Championship 3 times. NWA Tag Team Championship Tournament winner 84. They're in the Hardcore Hall of Fame. The IWS World Tag Team Championships 1 time. The iGeneration Tag Team Championships 3 times. The IPW Tag Team Championships 1 time. Jim Crockett Promotions, they were the NWA World 6-Man Tag Team Champions 3 times with Dusty Rhodes. 3 times. 2 with Dusty Rhodes and 1 with Genichiro Tenryu. They held the Atlantic version the Mid-Atlantic version once. They're the Iron Team tournament winners in '89. The Jim Crockett Senior Memorial Cup winners in '86. NWA Hall of Fame, NWA Legends Hall of Fame of Heroes, Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame and Museum, class of 2011. Inducted members Road Warrior Animal, Road Warrior Hawk, and Paul Ellering. Pro Wrestling Illustrated, PWI Tag Team of the Year, 1983, 1984, 1985, and 1988. WPI Feud of the Year, 1987, with Dusty Rhodes, Nikita Koloff versus the Four Horsemen. Quebec, they're in the Quebec Wrestling Hall of Fame. They're in the Super World of Sports One Night Tag Team Tournament winners in 1991. Tokyo Sports Best Foreigner Award winner, 1985. WWF Tag Team Champions twice, and WWE Hall of Fame. Their Wrestling Observer Newsletter Awards, Rookies of the Year, 1983. Tag Team of the Year, 1984. Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame, class of '86. IWGP Tag Team Championships twice. And PWI ranked them 58 of the 100 best tag teams of the PWI years in 2003. Paul Bosch. Okay. WWE. They held the WWE Tag Team Championship once, and the UWA World Tag Team Championships one time. So they got a lot of hardware there. Let's see. So because of a lot of that hardware that I just named is why I consider them the greatest tag team of all time. You know what I mean? They definitely you know, over the years were big time wrestlers, legends in the game. They also, obviously Hawk was, the party animal type dude, and Animal wasn't. And Animal was able to keep the team together, on the business end of things for, majority of their time as professional wrestlers and as a tag team together. But there were times where, it was hard for him to get the best deal for them going because of some of the antics that Hawk was involved with and pulled over the years. You know what I mean? He liked to take pills and he liked to drink, and I don't know if it went further than that with substances, actual drugs, not pharmaceutical drugs, but drugs. But nonetheless, pharmaceuticals, if they're abused, it's the same outcome. You know what I mean? So, it is what it is. But Joe Laurinaitis, aka Animal, is, he just passed away as well. I think about 2 years ago now, and he had a great business mind. Where they were able to. I even believe they at some point went in business together on they owned some gyms, and then I don't know if you guys remember those pants that bodybuilders used to wear. They were kind of like MC Hammer type pants. They were, I believe, they were owners of a company that put out stuff like that. You know what I mean? Or they might have just been spokesmen. They might have had contracts with them for advertising purposes. But definitely, these guys were two huge, iconic members of the pro wrestling business, and they made a ton of money. You know what I mean? Back when, these guys probably made $500,000 a year for Jim Crockett Promotions. WWF, they probably made a little bit more, but at some point, it was $500,000 a year for a pro wrestler. That's a lot of money. You know what I mean? $500,000 to $1 million a year for a good all through the '80s, pretty much. You know what I mean? And then definitely when they went to Japan early on, they capitalized and made a ton of money. You know what I mean? So it is what it is. I don't hate on nobody's money. Do your thing. You know what I mean? Uh, to, they definitely bring back a lot of memories. When I was looking through the pictures, which ones to use for the thumbnails, man, I remember all the different looks they had. When they first came in, it was just more of a. Actually, when they first came in, it was just like I had mentioned it when I was talking earlier. It was just the Road Warrior, and that was Animal, which his name was the Road Warrior. And I don't even think he had face paint at that time. He would just wear, dress in the jean, the denim like vest or whatever, and he'd have gloves on. You know what I mean? And then once he got and Hawk as a partner, then they started like drawing little designs with the paint. You know what I mean? But which later turned into like a whole project. You know what I mean? It was once they got better with putting the face paint on, you could tell, and how they over the years how they uh advanced, with their look and all that. Then they busted out the shoulder pads, they start putting the spikes on it, and they had their own look. Yeah, nobody ever, even though Demolition was, based off of uh, their gimmick, and so was Power of Pain. They still didn't have the success that they had, or the charisma that they had, and definitely couldn't mess with them on the promos, on the interviews. No way, nobody could have messed with them. You know what I mean? Animal would say, Hawk would, or Animal, beat you up, and tell him, Hawk, well, he would come like that. That shit was badass back then when I was a little kid, 7, 8 years old, watching this shit. You know what I mean? And those dudes were beasts, man. It brought back a lot of memories when I watched some of these wrestling events. Jim Crockett promotions and stuff like that. That was my main. That was my main promotion. Jim Crockett. You know what I mean? So I appreciate everybody that stopped in tonight or this morning. Excuse me. Yankees for Life, Edwin, Michael Mormile, Wendy, uh, YK Beast, New Age Plug, and anybody else that comes and watches it after it's uploaded. Appreciate each and every one of you guys. Feel free to leave comments in the comments section. And if you haven't already, sub to the channel. Please do so. It'd be highly appreciated. That being said, Big Lou's going to tap on out. What it do with Big Lou, NMZR2. Thanks.